I know I'm the last speaker, so I'm between you and your first drink, hopefully, so I'll hurry up. I brought you a somewhat somber sort of title to this presentation, which is very un-Miami, why freelance marketplaces have not yet disrupted the $200 billion staffing industry. And we'll take a step back and try to sort of figure out why that is. But first, looking at labor markets in general, anyone who's been following the news, we've seen sort of the lowest unemployment numbers in over 50 years. That bump there is the COVID bump. So, you know, but if you draw a line from the very left to the very right, you see there's sort of somewhat of a trend that is showing that unemployment is on the decline, which is a good thing, by the way. And it seems to be that it's somewhat decoupling from sort of traditional correlations. Those of you who read economics at university or have a weird interest in economic history in general, there was such a thing as the Phillips curve, which sort of, you know, connected inflation and unemployment. And again, you know, there's sort of somewhat of a COVID effect, you know, due to sort of all the fiscal stimulus that was going on there. But if you look on the left, right, anything up to 2020, you see it's sort of inflation's been pretty flat, so it doesn't seem like it's explaining that decline in unemployment. So, you know, I guess the question is sort of what's going on, right? And when you look at the Federal Reserve, that again, if you read the news, is desperately trying to sort of cool this labor market by increasing the interest rate, they're not having much success, right? They're doing everything they can. They increased it sort of, you know, in 2008, right? And then 2018, and then that dropped, and now they're increasing it again. But these labor markets are resilient, right? So the question remains, why is that the case? And the answer is simple, or part of the answer is simple. We just don't have enough kids. I don't know about you, you know, I'm working hard on it. I have one, second one on the way, but you know, we need more than that. That's just sort of the replacement rate. We should probably need to, you know, each of us get up to like 3 or 4. So that's, you know, that's a real issue in labor markets. The second part of the answer is we don't have enough immigration. As you see, it's also been trending down somewhat. It's, you know, a little bit more positive in 2020. Part of that was sort of, you know, the administration that we had in this country. I don't know how political you can get on this. We are in Miami, but sort of still. And then you had COVID, right? So that impacted all of that. But again, as you can see, sort of the trend seems to be somewhat downwards. And all of that leads to we have more open jobs than we have unemployed people, right? So if you look at that horizontal line, which is drawn at 1 would mean we have the exact number of open jobs to the exact number of unemployed people. There tends to be a mismatch between those two things. You know, I was thinking hard and thinking about sort of one industry where you have more unemployed people than you have jobs. And I came up with librarians. That was sort of, you know, the most creative I could get, because everything else, you know, historically people said truck drivers, right? But they're in high demand, they're not unemployed. You know, then the mailman, because email was supposed to replace them, they're in high demand, they're not unemployed. So, you know, if you have a spare minute later on, try to think about sort of a niche where there's more unemployed people than there's open jobs. And, you know, I dare you. All of that should mean that companies should get creative finding talent, right? Whenever people are desperate, you know, when they walk in the desert and there's a Coke, people are willing to pay whatever, even if they're fans of Pepsi. You know, desperation tends to sort of make people creative and desperate for new solutions. And because this is a conference about marketplaces, even though I heard a little bit about classifieds, but let's focus a little bit on freelance, because there's also a trend in itself. People sort of crave that flexibility. But we see that growth, right, which is sort of above GDP growth. It's above sort of general labor market growth, you know, close to sort of 6% CAGR. And sort of, you know, you see all of that, and then you see this. So the staffing industry is still 97% analog. You know, forgive me, analog is they use email, but it is pretty much analog. No one interacts with a marketplace per se. You have, you know, close to 3% between sort of Fiverr and Upwork as sort of an ownership of the market, which is pretty little. And tech not disrupting the staffing industry is a little bit like sort of the phone beating OpenTable to the job. I don't know how many of you have not used OpenTable yet, but you know, today is the day for sure. When you look at staffing in comparison to the restaurant experience, it's even worse. And making a dinner reservation is already pretty dreadful, right? So you call the restaurant, you probably called 5 restaurants to find an available table. Then, you know, in my case, Rosenzweig, they most of the time misspell the name, shorten it, the table's not available, etc. It's a really sort of, you know, non-smooth experience for the consumer. And it's even worse in staffing. So in staffing, it's sort of, it almost takes 4 to tango. You have a client that is calling an account manager at the staffing firm. The account manager is talking to the recruiter, and the recruiter is then calling the candidate, right? That is sort of the common workflow that you see. So it's pretty, you know, it takes a long time, pretty tedious, and it's more expensive, which is, you know, remarkable, given that it's still 97% of the market. Labor markets are different. That's what we hear all the time. So if you look at eBay, if you look at this, you know, grill example, there's a product and there's a seller, right? And the seller somewhat vets for the quality of the product, and then you have the marketplace itself that vets for the quality of the seller, and that's how that typically works. In labor markets, that's a little bit trickier, right? Like, just think who's the seller in that scenario. You know, is the talent is the product, and then it's also the seller at the same time. So where does the trust come from, right, that we experience? I think this is probably eBay, but you have that on Amazon marketplaces, you know, Airbnb. You always have a marketplace that vets for a seller that then vets for a product. Efficiency is not everything. Because of that trust challenge that we see in labor marketplaces, people revert to the human being, right? Again, that explains the 97% market share of staffing firms versus online marketplaces. Things like empathy, chit-chat, trust, human ingenuity are all things that people revert to when there's uncertainty in the market. They like to talk to someone that can basically assure them that the person that will show up at the door and do the work for them is great, right? So the staffing firm acts as the seller, and the staffing firm is sort of a tangible human being that you talk to. So, you know, we started a labor marketplace, and we sort of somewhat capitulated. We grew decently, but not, you know, the hockey stick that you like to see. And so we gave up a little bit and said, okay, if you want the trust, if you want the empathy, if you want the human touch, right, it's very difficult for us to do on a tech platform. We thought, you know, I'm a native German, so I thought it's all about efficiency, like what is all this human touch stuff? But, you know, we got to the point where we were like, okay, we give up, and we bought ourselves 2 staffing firms. One in June last year with about 80 million in top line, and then another one in January of this year with about 30 million in top line. But it was not so much about the revenue as it was about the people that work at these staffing firms that could add the human touch to our marketplace. And with that human touch, the trust, the ingenuity, and also, frankly, the chit-chat, right? Like, how are you? How are your kids? People talk about the weather, not in Miami, but, you know, in New York they do, especially now. So what we basically did is we created somewhat of a cyborg solution, right? We were back in the game. We added the human touch to our sterile marketplace that was so beautifully efficient. And because we love that efficiency, we basically found this type of sort of, what we refer to as the cyborg setup, where you have as a client the option to talk to the human, talk about the weather, talk about your kids, and then that recruiter uses our technology, so you do get the efficiency gain. But we also allow the, sort of more daring client and more progressive and sort of, tech-savvy client to directly engage with the marketplace and then find the talent. And when we started out, we sort of, we projected on our nice PowerPoint presentations to raise the money to buy these staffing firms, that we could make an average recruiter about 33% more productive, right? A lot of tasks that no human should do, scheduling, summarizing resumes, etc. And, we were sort of, for some of them we were better, making people more efficient, and some of them we were less. What you can see sort of in the second column there, right? Payrolling is a very technical sort of thing that can be almost entirely automated. If you look at, sort of describing the job, that's a little bit harder because it requires semantics. But we are in Miami, so we need a little bit of buzz. Generative language models are revolutionizing sort of that projection. We upward revised our projections from the 33% efficiency gain to above a 70% efficiency gain, because now this enhanced tech that we have, or that OpenAI and Microsoft share and kindly sort of give to us, allows us to take over more of these sort of semantic tasks that we historically sort of left to the recruiter. And if you remember, we bought the staffing firms to have the human touch on our platform, and now technology is coming and almost, creating this human touch through technology. So if you ever want to have a chit chat, you can do that with ChatGPT, and it actually sort of works quite well. Even though it does feel weird because it's still a computer, but you may or may not know when you're engaging with us. Looking into the future as much as we can, but sort of our anticipation is that what will set us apart from others is that we have all of this private data from having acquired these staffing firms in the past. They all have CRMs, they all have databases about all these transactions that they had in the past between a client and a freelancer, right, or a temporary worker. And our systems are training on that private data, which will set our matching algorithms apart from those that are training on public data. So I promise I'll keep that short. Couple of learnings. Labor markets are unique because there's no seller. Because there are no sellers in labor markets, people revert to staffing firms. They want the human touch. Humans can sort of help bridge that gap in times of uncertainty, getting people to take a decision and looking forward to having a freelancer work for them. The cyborg solution is what we opted for. We sort of enhance the human being with our technology so we can give clients and freelancers what they want, which is the efficiency of a platform plus the human touch of a genuine human interaction. The Miami bus generative language models are promising. They're taking over some of that human touch sort of delivery to our clients and freelancers, frankly. We believe owning the data is key because data will be the commodity that will train your models and make your models better than those of others. And like all marketplaces, size matters. So we're growing fast. We're buying more staffing firms as we go along. Thank you very much.
Marlon, thank you for that. Super interesting what you're doing. Bring up Slido, ask your questions, please. Make life easier. And for us. Now, thank you. So when you're doing all this, right, what have been the biggest headaches, the biggest challenges for you in pulling it all together? Because it's not like, looks fantastic, right? Great presentation.
Does it? Okay.
But there's got to be some things that are keeping you awake at night.
Yeah, I think, one thing is when you have a lot of people that are supposed to row into one direction, that is inherently tricky, right? So I think making sure that there is sort of the same understanding of quality, right? This is how we want to present ourselves to our clients and to our talent. That is much harder to achieve with a human being than a computer program, right? I can just tell the application to do that. Try doing that with 250 people. You'll see there's more variance than there is in your computer program, right? Yeah. I think that is sort of one of the challenges that we saw. And then there is a little bit this sometimes fatigue to like adopt change, right? Where it's like, hey, here's the greatest tool. Even OpenTable had that, right? Like my parents used sort of the phone to make dinner reservations till recently. They just never got to that point where they really saw the value in that. So that I would say is sort of the two main challenges.
Okay. Now, you're saving a lot of money in the agencies. Is that extra profit or cheaper services? Yes and yes?
No, we keep the prices to our clients the same, right? And our clients have some of the highest retention in the market. So it just generates extra profits for our employees that are sort of, partially commission compensated, as well as our shareholders because there's more profit.
Okay, that makes sense. When you think about the application of AI and how that can really make the process even more efficient, I assume that's on one end is on the talent side is making sure that whatever they say is true, and they actually, I guess there's two elements, right? One is what they've said in the past is true, and two is, are they a good fit for the company that they're going for, right? Because if it's a good fit, you got a higher retention rate. A higher retention rate means you're going to get repeat business. If they sort of bounce after 3 months, you've got a problem because you've got a warranty basically to find someone else. It costs you money and it's a pain in the ass. So how does AI, let's focus on that. How does AI help solve that problem or make life easier for you?
So I think one is the quality of the data, right? If I know that you have done this job multiple times, clients were happy with you, extended your contracts, rehired you, that is good, right? Everybody can interpret that as good, so they can take you and place you somewhere else, and the confidence interval.
As long as you've got the truth, because people lie.
That is true. That is true.
How do you verify, right?
Yeah, so that was my point about owning the data. If I paid you for your previous engagements because I'm the marketplace, right, I can verify that, right? The company would never pay me to pay you if that was a lie, right? So that's a pretty good, solid data point right there.
Yes, if you are a very large dominant player and you've got a lot of people going through you.
Correct.
But if you're not, how do you start to get through, the LinkedIn bullshit, everyone embellishes what they've done. How do you cut through that?
Yeah, so in freelancing, what typically happens, which is not unique to us as market standard, you call previous employers and you check, right? That used to be a human process, which it still is because you want to avoid fraud. So you send out emails, people respond, and then you pick up the phone and you ask. In freelancing, as opposed to call it perm or direct hiring, it's a little bit less, but that is sort of the manual process of verifying that. AI sort of, we don't see that as a big issue for us. We'd rather sort of focus on just getting verifiable data ourselves and then match based on that.
Okay, so then how do you use technology to get a better match? That's sort of getting deeper, because if you get a better match, better retention, make more money.
So better data is the one ingredient, right? And then sort of the second one, and this is pre-Prejet GBT, I suppose, we always use sort of machine learning models that run multivariate regressions on all of these variables to figure out, okay, what is relevant in predicting success in that match, right? And interesting things come up. It could be something like, responding to emails fast is a good indicator of a match between those, the company and the candidate, or it may well not be, right? It depends on the role. And those are things where humans sort of develop, what we call sort of ingenuity. They can figure that out. It's like, this is not going to be a fit because this company is really anally retentive. and this person is more sort of laid back, that's not a fit.
Yep.
Machines cannot really interpret that until you tell them to.
Yep. I think we've just answered the first question by luck. Assuming you raised funds from recent acquisitions mentioned, what was that like considering the current context? How easy was it to raise money? I'll translate.
That's the, okay, current context starts March last year when interest rates went up?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so we raised the money in June of last year, got a facility in place, a debt facility in place. So we had somewhat of a pre-commitment. I think, I think we got lucky there, and now we're just proving out that everything we said on our shiny PowerPoint presentation is true. So it hasn't been an issue, in sort of for that most recent acquisition.
Okay. Data is critical here. How do you scale that data access further? Do you need to acquire more and more agencies, or can you grow data set organically? Yeah,
so both. We think data is crucial. We will acquire more and more staffing firms. We gain, historic data of 10 to 15 years that these firms have been in existence. It's pretty uniform data. It's not complicated. It's pretty easy to just sort of import into our systems. Growing it organically is, we have about a 35% growth rate organically, where we just have all of these transactions and more of those over time. So that is the organic growth path in combination with the inorganic growth path.
Okay. How many more acquisitions are you going to do?
100. We're in Miami.
Right.
Make it 1,000. Yeah.
Okay. Now,
no, I don't think we.
Let's be precise. Well,
let's be precise.
A bit more, not hundreds of thousands, but you must be thinking of 1 or 2 a year we can do and ingest and without getting distracted.
Yeah, there's 25,000 staffing firms in the United States. There's 175 that do more than 100 million in revenue. Our ambition is to close between 3 and 4 a year. Within sort of a size range of 20 to 50 million in revenue.
Okay. What percentage of traditional staffing firms will get disrupted, and in what time frame?
If you had asked the Upwork CEO 3 years ago, they would have said tomorrow. There was this stickiness because of that human touch. I think staffing firms, there's this perm business, which I think is very hard to disrupt in general. I think on the freelance side, the cyborg solution that we're sort of, talking about, I think, that should own the entire market. I don't see why not.
Okay. Who else is working on this sort of solution? Everyone must be going, it makes a lot of sense to say, oh, let's leverage AI, but it's not going to replace people because recruiting clearly has a degree of face-to-face interaction, maybe if you're doing burger flippers, maybe you can more commoditize it, right? But at the end of the day, you need to have that element of humanism around it. So you can't be the only ones doing this.
No, we're not. So we are, to our knowledge, the only ones that are doing it in our segment, which is sort of software engineers, marketing talent, data, creative, sort of that is our realm. There are super talented people in Spain that are doing that for, warehouse workers, burger flippers. They're doing that in the blue collar section. And then there is a group out of Austin, Texas, in the US. They're doing that for oil and gas and renewable workers. But sort of that's, I don't know whether that is, collusion, but, we're sort of separating the market like that. Okay.
So, now you referred to chit chat a few times. Can you expand on the dynamic you're referring to as it comes as benefit from staffing firms?
When we first learned about this, just go to a sales floor of a staffing firm and you hear a lot of talk about the weather, kids, sports, especially in the States. It's a lot about sports. I think, we're all humans. We like to have chit chat, right? Some more than others. But I think it's just, until you change human nature, that will be part of it.
Yep. And so what you're saying is that chit chat at the moment is hard to replicate using artificial intelligence. So you need the human who can talk about the Miami Dolphins on the weekend and how they went.
Yeah. And
but eventually that's going to be AI'd, right? It has to be.
Potentially, yeah. I think right now you still feel the difference, right? I think chit chat has intrinsic value as it is pleasant for some people, right? The majority, and then it's trust instilling. It's like, oh, we have the same interest, right? So now I trust you a little bit more in our business transaction. So that is, I think those two things may need to be separated, because the pleasantry itself, that I don't think a machine can take over.
No. And okay, so why not expand by acquiring a programmatic advertising platform for candidates? More capital efficient? Question mark.
You don't get the data, right? You just get a sign up, which is not bad, but you don't get the historic data. So I think that's one. But it's not a bad idea. We'll think about it.
Well, that's a good answer. Okay, Marlon, thanks very much.
Thank
Super
you.
interesting what you're doing, and thank you for taking the time
very
to
much.
join us today.
Cheers.